A short video in C# to show how we can load from a text file. First thing we need to do is to add an extra line of code here, because we are going to be using the system's I/O, which is the input output. Once we've got that, seem to have these aligned, put them back in line, there we go. And we're going to have a variable, a string variable. We're going to call this line. This is what's going to store the line from my text file into it. I'm going to make use of a stream reader, and this is what's available after importing this library systems.io. I'm going to call this my file load equals new stream reader. I'm going to give it a file name. Now I can directly just put a name there, that file name, so we don't need to put an actual file path in there. You can do if you like. You can put, say, C:/ and give a full file path. If we just give the name of the file, that means that we expect that file to be in the debug folder. If I right click, I can choose open folder in File Explorer, and this has got the files associated with that program. I can then go into the bin, into the debug, and there is my file I'm going to use. So you can create the files in there, you can copy it in. So in terms of the exam, you will be expected to put the file into the debug folder. I've got that file. It's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 names in there. I'll add another name in there. Save that. I'll end on that line. Close that. Finish that. Okay. So we're using that particular file. Now I don't know how many lines are in it, and if we want a program that's going to just load in every line from that file, then we could do with a while loop to check, are there any lines in that file in the first place. So file load lots.read line. So like we use the console read line, we can use the same from using the file. So just put that in place. We can see here we've got read line, but instead of console.read line, it's whatever I've called this file here .read line, and therefore that takes the next line from that file. It's assigning it to this variable line here, and what it's saying, it's going to do this loop while that isn't null, which means while it's being able to read a line. So quite simply, I'm just going to do a console write line, and I'm going to output this directly to the screen. Put a read line in there, stop the program closing, run that, and there it takes the names out of the file. It's reading them, it's checking it's not null, it's outputting it, and it continues until it reaches a null point, so it's read each of those names in there. That's just outputting them, but we can get it to store in, for example, an array. So for example, I'm going to have an array of strings. I'm going to call this names equals new string, and just going to give it a name, position of 5, or let's give it a position of 10. And instead of outputting that there, if I have a little counter, so I'm going to have int count, set my count as 0, and my names in position count is a sign line as well. Count equals count plus 1. Okay, so that will load them all into an array, and at the end of this I'm just going to output 1 as an example. I'll output the first item that gets placed in there. Okay, so if we run this now, it's output them all as the console write line, which it's just doing there. It has loaded them all into an array, and you can see there it's output the array in position 0, which is where we started, which was named Fred. We can alter this to have obviously a for loop. Oops. Okay, so I've added that for loop there after it. So we've got an integer variable I starts with 0, and while that's less than or equal to count, which we've counted the number of lines on the file, I'm going to increment that by 1 each time, so that will output every single name in that file. I've taken out that console write line there as well, so the whole purpose of this while loop is to load each line from the file and pop that into an array. Now I can only have up to 10 names because I've only declared the size of the array as 10, but if we run that now, we should be able to see there are my names. One of the things we can do if we don't know the size of the file, for example, if I went in here now into the bin, into my debug, into my file, I'm going to pop another few names in there. Sue, we've got Betty and Bill. Save that. We sometimes don't know how many lines there's going to be in a file, so it's important to be able to read as many as we want. And if we're reading it into an array, then knowing what size to put the array is important. So what I've done here, I've declared an array and I've given it the size 0, so really it's given it one position to be able to store something in. Well, I'm actually setting that as a blank array. And the first time around this loop, if the file is not null, then I'm resizing the array. It's sending this as a reference parameter, so that is my name. This is an inbuilt method, and it's resizing that count plus 1. So this is indicating that actually my count was initially 0. I'm reading one item from the file, and therefore I need one space to be able to put a name in. This continues to resize that array for every time around this loop. For my output, I've just made a little tweak here. I've said while I is less than count, because if it loaded in 6 names, I starts at 0 and it'll finish at 5, and that'll be 6. And I'm then finding the size of the array and outputting that. So if we look at the program running, this has read in those extra names that I've popped in there as well. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. The size of the array is size 9, and that has resized it. So that is a video demonstration of how to load data from a file, and we're loading strings there, single item at a time. If we wanted to expand on that and imagine that in our file we was reading names and ages, then we could actually put this each one on a separate line. So in our file, or even high scores, for instance, Fred had a score of 34, Bob had 12, Mary had 45, 43, 76, 2, 4, 25, something like that. Then on the first line we're reading a name, on the second line we're reading a score. So we can bring in another array into it. We can have another array, scores equals new size 0. Okay, exactly the same way, but obviously the next read line is bringing in the score. So we've saved that to there. We'd have to have an array resize for the scores, and scores in position count equals. Now because we've already done that read line for the first line, we could just do exactly the same again. Here we go, and when we output the name and space plus scores in position I. Fingers crossed. Here we go, we've got the names and their associated scores. Okay folks, thanks for watching. That is an introduction into loading files in C#.